It finally happened. The moment we all saw coming from a mile away. But Trump, blinded by arrogance and obsessive control, charged toward it anyway. His latest stunt? Slapping a brutal tariff on Canadian goods. Again. And this time he expected Canada to back down. But what he got instead was a masterclass in economic leadership from Prime Minister Mark Carney that left his administration scrambling, Wall Street panicking, and the world stunned.
If you're done watching corrupt elites rig the system and leave you behind, subscribe now. If you want real talk, raw truth, and zero spin, this is your channel. If you're ready to fight back, hit that subscribe button and stand with us.
Let's be clear, this isn't just another trade spat. This is Trump's tariff machine collapsing under weight of its own ego, and Carney calmly, strategically, and unapologetically outplaying him at every turn. Because while Trump stood at a podium, red-faced and blustering about protecting American jobs and stopping unfair trade, Carney was already 5 moves ahead. He prepared Canada for this moment. He knew he was dealing with a man who treats international diplomacy like a reality show and wields tariffs like tantrums. So when Trump slapped a new tariff, 50%, on Canadian steel and aluminum, Carney didn't rant. He didn't rage. He retaliated with precision, not with insults, but with policy, not with theatrics, but with strategy. Canada gave Trump a deadline, July 21st, make a fair deal or face consequences, not a threat, a plan. And unlike Trump's empty posturing, this one had teeth. Carney's government announced they were ready to launch targeted counter tariffs that would hit Trump where it hurts. Swing states, key industries, major donor networks, agricultural products, U.S. vehicles, processed goods, not in anger, but as a defensive maneuver to shield Canadian workers from an economic bully with a Twitter account. And that's the heart of this story. Carney didn't react emotionally. He responded intelligently. Trump, as usual, assumed Canada would buckle. After all, in his mind, America is the sun, and everyone else just orbits around it. But Carney wasn't playing his game. He was writing a new one. Because Canada didn't just prepare to defend itself. It expanded outward. While Trump boxed himself into a corner with threats and instability, Carney was building trade bridges with Europe, East Asia, and Latin America. He accelerated deals. He diversified markets. He made sure that no matter what came from Washington, Canadian exports had somewhere else to go. Trump isolated America. Carney integrated Canada. And let's talk about the difference in leadership here. One man can't finish a sentence without bragging about crowd size or electoral maps. The other worked in the trenches of global finance, led the Bank of England through crisis, and now leads a G7 economy with calm, clarity, and competence. When Trump attacked, Carney didn't need to respond with insults because his results spoke louder. Canada's economy stayed stable. Markets didn't panic. Business leaders praised his clarity. Even U.S. companies with cross-border operations started raising concerns, not about Canada, but about Trump's unpredictability. Because make no mistake, this tariff backfired. Prices rose across the U.S. Almost immediately, manufacturers in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland started to feel the squeeze. Builders delayed projects. Auto workers faced slowdowns. And farmers? Furious. The counter tariffs from Canada meant their products, corn, wheat, dairy, would get slapped with fees that made them less competitive in Canadian markets. The irony? Trump launched these tariffs under the guise of protecting American jobs. But all he did was threaten thousands of them. And while he ranted about winning, Carney reminded the world what real leadership looks like. He consulted with provincial premiers, worked with trade unions, briefed business chambers, and secured public support. He built consensus, something Trump wouldn't recognize if it smacked him across the face with a balance sheet. But perhaps the most devastating blow to Trump's tactics came not from Carney's calm, but from his data. Carney laid out exactly how much American companies depended on Canadian resources. He pointed out that Canada is America's largest customer for manufacturing exports, that our two economies are symbiotic, not adversarial, that any attack on Canada is, by economic design, an attack on the U.S. economy itself. Trump didn't have a rebuttal. He just shouted fake news and changed the subject. Meanwhile, Carney continued doing what Trump could never manage, building trust. Among allies, among businesses, among voters, because this isn't just about trade, it's about reputation. And while Trump dragged America's global standing to the mud, Carney lifted Canada's stature, quietly but firmly, as a model for diplomacy, partnership, and economic foresight. Let's be real. Trump's tariffs aren't policy, they're tantrums. They're smokescreens for failure. They're tools for distraction whenever the polls dip or the scandals creep too close. But with Carney, there's no chaos. Just contingency plans. Just resilience. Just facts. That's why, as Trump spiraled into another tirade, Carney's administration simply released a statement reaffirming Canada's commitment to fair trade, but warning, in no uncertain terms, that retaliation would escalate unless the July 21st deadline was met with a legitimate deal. And here's the twist that really shook Trump's camp. Canada didn't blink. They signaled they were ready, not for war, but for independence. If the U.S. wouldn't play fair, Canada would play smart. They'd strengthen other alliances, deepen supply chains across the Pacific, invest in domestic production, create jobs by retooling Canadian industry, without the need to placate Washington's whims. It was the clearest message yet. Canada will not be cornered. And Trump? All he had left was bluster. But even that's wearing thin. His base is grumbling. His donors are worried. His own economists are warning him that this tariff stunt may tank key markets heading into the election. Meanwhile, Carney is already looking ahead. New tax incentives for local manufacturers. Subsidies to lure foreign investors away from the U.S. A trade education initiative to future-proof Canadian labor. Infrastructure funding to enhance port capacity and export logistics. This isn't just a reaction, it's a reinvention. And every time Trump lashes out, he exposes the difference even more starkly. One man governs with chaos. The other leads with clarity. So here we are, watching history unfold. Not just a trade dispute, but a transformation. Canada isn't just standing up to Trump. It's growing out of his shadow. It's taking the punches, yes, but it's also setting the rules for the next round. Trump thought he could crush Carney's Canada with a tariff. Instead, he awakened a country and a leader who refused to be bullied ever again. Subscribe now to follow every step of the showdown. Because this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Canada is rising. Carney is leading. And Trump? He's watching his power slip, one failed tariff at a time. The tariff meltdown continues. Carney's long game versus Trump's chaos show. You'd think that after gutting his own auto industry, alienating his allies, and watching inflation burn through middle-class wallets like wildfire, Trump might pause and reassess. But no, he doubled down. He launched another round of tariffs, this time on processed timber, renewable energy components, and even Canadian medical equipment. Yes, medical equipment. Amid a global supply chain crisis, Trump decided the answer was to punish one of the few countries that had always delivered when America needed help. And in doing so, he handed Mark Carney another golden opportunity, not just to defend Canadian interests, but to showcase exactly why Canada's economic leadership now commands global attention. Carney didn't take the bait. He didn't scream into cameras or issue performative threats. Instead, he held a summit with his finance minister, supply chain experts, and trade officials. The goal? Transform the crisis into structural reform. While Trump sees every trade tiff as a battlefield, Carney sees it as leverage. And this time, he's using it to go all in on strategic reshoring. Canada is now offering billions in incentives to businesses that manufacture domestically, from ventilator parts to high-efficiency turbines. Carney isn't just reacting to U.S. aggression. He's using it as an excuse to unshackle Canada from decades of overdependence on an increasingly unstable partner. Meanwhile, Trump's own manufacturers are screaming. Lumber yards are halting construction contracts. Builders are panicking. Retailers are warning that holiday prices will surge. And every economic indicator is flashing red. But Trump doesn't deal in data. He deals in distraction. So he goes back to his base, flinging out tired slogans. Canada's been taking advantage of us. We're bringing jobs home. Tariffs are beautiful. And in the background, economists ripping their hair out, watching another wave of economic self-sabotage unfold in real time. Carney, by contrast, is offering a very different message: stability. He's meeting with G7 leaders, reaffirming multilateral cooperation. He's collaborating with provincial premiers to launch a Made in Canada supply chain initiative that cuts red tape and accelerates domestic sourcing. He's rolling out capital access programs for small exporters hurt by U.S. disruptions. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Trump isolates. Carney integrates. Trump improvises. Carney plans. Trump demands loyalty. Carney earns trust. And this trust is starting to reshape global trade routes. Germany just signed a long-term procurement deal with Canadian tech firms, bypassing U.S. intermediaries entirely. Japan is expanding joint energy exploration off Canada's Atlantic coast. Even Mexico, once a pawn in Trump's NAFTA drama, is negotiating a new trilateral framework with Ottawa as a lead voice. Trump, once the alpha negotiator of the Western Hemisphere, is now the odd man out, and it's not just because of tariffs. It's because of temperament. Trump governs through fear. Carney governs through facts. Let's talk about the Canadian public. Despite Trump's efforts to stir division, Canadians across political lines have rallied around Carney's trade strategy. Polls show overwhelming support for his refusal to be bullied. Even conservative premiers are backing his tariff retaliation package, calling it measured, necessary, and patriotic. Carney isn't playing party politics. He's playing national economics. And it's working. As Trump fumbles through one economic press conference after another, Carney has emerged as the unflinching adult on the world stage. Business outlets praise him for orchestrating calm under siege. Diplomats describe him as the rare voice of sanity in a time of global dysfunction. But Trump? He's busy insulting Canadian dairy farmers. Yes, in the middle of this crisis, Trump took time to rant about the Canadian milk mafia. His aides had to clarify he wasn't joking. This is what happens when your president doesn't know the difference between a subsidy and a strategy. Meanwhile, Carney was in Brussels securing enhanced CETA terms that open Canadian products to another 500 million consumers. Let's talk numbers. Since Trump imposed his latest round of tariffs, the U.S. has lost an estimated $4.2 billion in trade activity with Canada. Canadian exports to non-U.S. markets have increased by 13%. Foreign direct investment in Canadian infrastructure is up 9%. And Ottawa just signed a new co-production treaty with France's aerospace sector, diverting contracts that would have once gone through Boeing. Every move Trump makes to punish Canada only makes it stronger, because Carney doesn't get distracted. He builds resilience. He's turning this moment into a permanent pivot, investing in economic sovereignty, amplifying global diplomacy, and securing the kind of long-term prosperity that can't be undone by one bad election south of the border. And what does Trump have to show for it? He's alienated a neighbor, gutted his credibility, and triggered a quiet exodus of investment as companies start to hedge against American volatility by relocating to Carney's Canada. Because here's the hard truth. In a global economy, trust is currency, and the U.S. under Trump has defaulted. Canada? Canada's got a surplus. Let's not forget how we got here. Trump came into office promising deals, leverage, and power. But when faced with actual diplomacy, he resorted to threats, tantrums, and name-calling. That's not leadership. It's insecurity. Carney, on the other hand, didn't promise fireworks. He promised competence. And that's what he's delivered. While Trump was obsessing over how to beat Canada, Carney was proving that the real isn't about domination. It's about stability, sovereignty, and smarts. And now, with Trump's credibility in tatters and America's economy reeling from its own self-inflicted wounds, the question isn't whether Canada can survive without the U.S. It's whether the U.S. can survive another trade war with Carney's Canada. So buckle up. The tariffs may have sparked this fire, but Carney's response has turned it into something far bigger, a complete realignment of how economic power works in North America. And as Trump flails, lashes out, and digs in deeper, Carney continues to move methodically, diplomatically, and decisively, transforming Canada from a junior partner to a center of global economic gravity. This isn't just about steel and tariffs anymore. It's about who's really in control of the future. And if you're still watching Trump for leadership, it might be time to look north. because that's where the real grown-ups are running the show. Here's what Donald Trump never understood. You can't intimidate a country that has options. You can't bluff when your opponent is holding a better hand and knows how to play it. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. Trump bet everything on brute force, on tariffs, on slogans, on bluster. He thought if he raised tariffs high enough, shouted loud enough, and pounded the podium hard enough, Canada would fold. He thought Mark Carney would cave. Instead, Carney pivoted. He outmaneuvered Trump by not meeting chaos with chaos, but with calm, calculated, devastatingly effective strategy. Take energy, for example. For decades, the U.S. was Canada's biggest customer for crude oil and natural gas. Trump assumed that gave him leverage. But Carney flipped the script. He launched a campaign to diversify energy exports to Europe and Asia, fast-tracking pipelines to the Pacific, investing in LNG infrastructure, and brokering new deals in Suddenly, Canadian gas isn't flowing south, it's sailing west. And American buyers? They're finding themselves less essential to Canada's energy future by the day. That's what happens when your only tactic is intimidation. Eventually, the people you push around find another way. And Trump? He's still stuck in the 1980s, talking about bringing jobs home with tariffs that have already destroyed thousands of them. His steel tariffs didn't revive industry. They caused production slowdowns, raised prices, and forced layoffs across the U.S. heartland. Construction firms are bleeding cash. Manufacturers can't source parts. And meanwhile, Carney's Canada is expanding domestic smelting capacity, investing in green aluminum, and striking trade deals that Trump's America is too isolated to access. Let's talk pharmaceuticals. One of Trump's new tariffs hit Canadian medical exports. It was a move so reckless, so lacking in foresight, that even his own health officials were blindsided. In response, Carney announced a national policy to expand domestic pharmaceutical production, not just to protect supply, but to turn Canada into a global health exporter. Quebec's biotech sector is booming. Foreign firms are relocating R&D north of the border. And with every impulsive tariff Trump imposes, Canada becomes more attractive to global capital. He thought he could squeeze Canada into submission. But Carney isn't just weathering the storm. He's building a new economy in the middle of it. And what's happening politically? Trump's trade war is fracturing his own coalition. Republican governors are being bombarded with complaints from farmers, manufacturers, and retailers. Senators are being pressed to demand clarity. And Carney? He's giving his people something Trump never could: confidence. Canadian workers aren't panicking. They're adapting because Carney's team briefs them, supports them, and plans for them. This isn't guesswork. It's governance. And as U.S. economic confidence dips with every unpredictable tweet, Canada's remains stable because the difference isn't just in policy. It's in leadership style. Trump screams. Carney prepares. Trump targets scapegoats. Carney builds coalitions. Trump obsesses over headlines. Carney focuses on outcomes. That difference matters. In diplomatic rooms, in trade summits, in markets. Because when Carney walks in, he brings clarity. When Trump walks in, he brings confusion. And the international community has taken notice. Global investors are pulling capital from the U.S., wary of instability, and directing it toward Canada's more predictable, more secure environment. Central banks are adjusting currency portfolios. Development projects are being redrawn because Canada, under Carney, isn't just managing a crisis. It's turning the page on an entire economic model, one that relies less on American demand and more on resilient independence. And what about the U.S. labor market? Trump promised prosperity, but his tariffs have cost more American jobs than they've saved. Auto plants are delaying expansions. Agribusiness is struggling to export. Construction firms are paying double for materials. Meanwhile, Canadian workers in steel, agriculture, and tech are being protected, not by empty promises, but by actual policies. Wage subsidies, market access guarantees, training for displaced workers. That's how a government behaves when it actually cares about its people, not just its image. And here's the ultimate irony. Trump thought he could paint Carney as weak, but in trying to force him to bend, He exposed just how strong Canada had become under his leadership. Carney didn't take the bait. He didn't rage back. He didn't call names. He simply laid out the facts, made his moves, and watched as Trump backed himself into a corner. Now, with the July 21st deadline looming and no deal in sight, Carney's team has activated Phase 2, sector-specific countermeasures aimed at minimizing harm to Canadian consumers while maximizing pressure on Trump's political base. Farm subsidies, state-level tax credits, transport reroutes, all calibrated to tighten the economic screws just enough to get Republican lawmakers screaming. And it's working. Behind the scenes, GOP donors are panicking. Business lobbyists are flooding Capitol Hill. Even Fox News is running segments questioning the strategy. Meanwhile, Carney remains unshaken because he doesn't need chaos to lead. He doesn't need propaganda. He has a plan. He has a team. And he has the support of a nation that knows real leadership when they see it. This trade war was supposed to be a show of American strength. Instead, it's become a showcase of Canadian resilience. Trump's America First has become America Isolated. And Carney's Canada? It's proving that in the 21st century, strength comes from cooperation, not coercion. Because this isn't just about tariffs anymore. It's about the future of diplomacy. It's about how nations navigate conflict without collapsing into dysfunction. It's about how real leaders step up, not with threats, but with vision. Trump gambled big. He underestimated Carney, underestimated Canada, and overestimated his ability to bully the world into submission. Now the results are in, and the world is watching as a quiet, steady, thoughtful leader reshapes the global conversation. Not with fire and fury, but with integrity, precision, and purpose. So if you're wondering who's winning this trade war, look at the numbers, look at the markets, look at the allies, and most of all, look at the people. Canadians aren't afraid. They're ready, because Trump may have sparked the fire, but Carney's the one building something out of the ashes.